This is severe pressure down. This is the ball. Keep your eye on the ball. This red of the weekly 10 going below that weekly 55 historically leads to some nasty events. What exactly got the capitulation of late 2018? Ta-da! This is current price. Do you see the similar setup? That is the ball. You need to keep your eye on. At the 89. That is the range. Weekly 89, weekly 10 pressure down. It's either got to avoid it or it's going to tank. It's the same cross. Bitcoin has a darn good chance of ending this week green. Let me show you why in the charts. Are you ready?
Hit the like button.
And subscribe.
Or else, let's go! We are looking at traditional markets, the Nasdaq Composite. The ticker is IXIC. I have taken the time to go back roughly 10 years on these weekly candles and highlight ones that are similar in nature, not necessarily the color, but similar in nature to the very last candle, which I will zoom in here. You can see that this candle and the other ones marked had a fairly aggressive sell-off near the what might be considered near the end of a more macro sell-off, but specifically there was left a long wick to the downside. Regardless of the end color of the candle, there was a strong buyback after a more prolonged sell-off. You see that? And these are weekly candles. And what we can see after marking about 10 years, maybe even farther in the past, is that typically the candle after this is typically not overly bearish. There are some cases where the next candle is red. That candle typically does over 20 years. I don't remember seeing a case where the next weekly candle closed below the open of the previous week's candle. For example, in 20 years, I did not find an instance where this next week's candle would close under that in 20 years. I couldn't find an instance of that. Some of the candles were in fact red. That would look something like this. And the reason that this is important is for two very connected things. First, Bitcoin is very clearly moving with traditional markets, particularly the Nasdaq, down to the 5-minute candle. A couple weeks ago, when Amazon alone pumped 18% at traditional markets close, exactly at 5:30, in one instant, not even 1 second passed, it went up 18%, and Bitcoin went up 5% on a 1-minute candle. It was absolutely insane. So that's the first connection. The second big reason why this is important is because Bitcoin is hanging off the side of a cliff, essentially. It's getting rejected by its origin line. Its weekly 10 is getting ready to slam price down even lower. It looks like it could capitulate at any moment. Therefore, try to figure out, A, what would be the timing if there truly is going to be a capitulation soon. Let's try to get the timing right. And under that premise, the timing, it doesn't look like it's this week. And two, are there signs that Bitcoin indeed might not capitulate? And this would be the first time under similar circumstances for Bitcoin that it's not going to capitulate, per my video that I produced on Sunday with a thumbnail that says about to crash. Because of these two things, it's very important to try to figure out the strength of traditional markets coming into this week. Going back to the weekly candles, similar candle, regardless of the ending color, you had an extended sell-off, strong sell pressure at the end, strong buyback. Next 4 weekly candles were green. Similar here, the next candle thereafter was green. Prolonged sell-off, strong buyback. The next week here was green. This led to a very large rally. However, this made a higher low. And with that weekly higher low, after an extended bearish market, this one led to a rally. And I don't think today's current market structure is similar to the surroundings of this candle, but the candle is fairly similar. Extended sell-off, large sell at the beginning, large buyback at the end of this candle. Another one right here. I'm going to have to zoom in a little bit. See how there was an extended sell-off, a large sell here, and a strong buyback. The next week thereafter, regardless of the 2 weeks thereafter being red, and then finding a low, the week in proximity to the candle highlighted here, let's make that arrow blue, was green. This one, very similar setup, green candle thereafter. Another instance, and this is going back roughly 8.5 years right here. Going back to 2011, another candle, they sell off and a buyback to end that week, and then the next week not only gapped up, but ended a very strong green candle. And today's current setup is not too dissimilar from this one. Extended sell-off, this week had a strong buyback, ended green, and here's one example. I guess this one did technically close just below the opening of the prior candles, but it's pretty damn close. Do you see this? That's what I was talking about. This is about the most bearish result that I've seen going back 20 years with a setup similar to this. This is the most bearish. However, even in that case, if that most bearish situation were to happen in this week with the geopolitical events happening, the effect on Bitcoin would not lead to a capitulation in that event. Now let's go take a look specifically at Bitcoin. Turn on your camera and microphone and ask me questions directly live up to 8 times a week directly to my face. Links to the Discord community within the description section of all my videos. Make sure you're following me on Twitter at cosasverdes with the number 2, cosasverdes2. If online communities are not your thing, but you want exclusive content above and beyond what I offer on YouTube, click the join button that's right below this video and another video will pop up describing your options to you. This is Bitcoin on the weekly candles with 2 EMAs and the tilted macro range. These blue lines are the tilted macro range. They seem to be getting things right more than any other range that I can come up with. Thanks to a VIP a couple weeks ago, he suggested I take my current macro range and tilt it to be exactly parallel to the precise wick highs of the two rallies, 64K and 69K roughly. I've been tweeting pretty relentlessly on this macro range within my Twitter account. Basic observations: Bitcoin went from the very top of the range, touched the bottom of the range, touched the point of control, and is now in the quarter zone. That's a very common play within any range, even if you're using the chart of Atom or Polygon Matic on the 1 hour. It doesn't matter. If you have a 1 hour range on an altcoin, it's a very common play to see the top of the range hit, you tank to the bottom, you go straight up to the point of the control, and then you try to make a higher low within the quarter range. Let me take off price here, and you can see that this is the top of the range, bottom of the range, point of control, 3/4 line, 1/4 line. In general, as long as price can stay in this 1/4 line, it doesn't have a strong chance of simply capitulating unless you see it something on the 4 hour chart. Price comes below this quarter line, then uses it as resistance. That's when you're going to want to start getting pretty worried about a potential capitulation. But right now, it seems to be finding support within it, particularly with this weekly closure. This week came below it and specifically did not use that bottom line of the quarter zone. It did not use it as resistance. You got a weekly close within the quarter zone and above the bottom line of that quarter zone. Now focusing on these 2 lines, EMAs right here, the blue and the purple. This blue is the weekly 55, the purple line is the weekly 89. In very general terms, price is finding itself between them. However, there is one thing to note within this little sandwich. So if this is an Oreo, price is the filling and the bread cracker part is weekly 55 and the weekly 89. However, you do have pressure down. I'm going to throw on the weekly 10, and you can see here that there is a very bearish cross here. This red of the weekly 10 going below that weekly 55 historically leads to some nasty events. It doesn't matter what asset it is. It could be gold, NASDAQ composite, black market, test market. This is severe pressure down. One thing that you might want to focus on for this week could be using the MTF indicator and throwing on your weekly 89 EMA, because it does seem to be aligning fairly closely to the bottom of the 1/4 zone. And also the weekly 10. Because if price gets squeezed by the red line, the 10 and the 89, that will lead to a capitulation. However, it could be a few weeks out. So what you can do is go to the lower time frames and keep those EMAs on to see how price is playing with it. Let's go in the past and take a look at this. Take a look at coronavirus. Price was pushed down by the 10 below the 89 and it led to a capitulation. See that? It's not good. And current price is equivalently right here. It is stuck between them. You can also see that sometimes as the red approaches the purple, price will work to avoid it and it'll rally to try to avoid that, as it did back here. Then obviously that rally failed and it succumbed to that red purple cross. And also, what exactly got the capitulation of late 2018? Ta-da! It's this same cross. Look at this. It's the same one. Look. Do you see how important this is? That is the range. Weekly 89, weekly 10 pressure down. It's either got to avoid it or it's going to tank. However, it doesn't have to happen this week. You could see from the capitulation event I just showed you late 2018, that price was sandwiched in there for quite a while. It could extend another 2 months. It could be a while. However, you need to keep your eye on the ball. Weekly 10 heading down with 89 as support. That is the ball. You need to keep your eye on. But what I'm going to do now is I'm going to go to the 4 hour time frame with the same weekly EMAs on, and I want you to live through price moving through them. Take a look at this. This is the weekly 10, something I was hooting and hollering about this whole trip up, saying this is going to be heavy resistance. This line will be resistance until the point price flies above it. Historically, in downtrends, Bitcoin price does not get above this line unless it's a big pop. It does it with volume in downtrends. I believe it's every damn time. That was after the capitulation of late 2018, early 2019, but that's one of very few exceptions to that general rule. Therefore, look at current price, purple line, red line. It's between it. Purple is support, red is resistance. This is the ball. Keep your eye on the ball. 2019 and 2020 coronavirus dump right here. 89 purple as support. Zoom way in here. Do you see how price in this downtrend went above the red line with volume and it flew past it? That is a good reaction. That's what has to happen in a downtrend as a rule of thumb that sometimes can be broken, but typically it has to zoom above that weekly 10. And then it got a really healthy retest and then it flew above. But you can see here, I don't know how more compelling this can be that these are the two things that you need to keep your eye on. It's completely clear to me, and I hope it is to you too. It's so easy to keep these EMAs on your chart no matter what time frame you're on using the indicator called MTF space EMA. Take a look here, 20K top of late 2017. The red line was the resistance of all these dead cat bounces. You see that every single time. Weekly 10, weekly 10, weekly 10, squeeze, 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 capitulate. You see this? So let's take a look at these EMAs and how price moved between them. We'll use the starting point. Let's go ahead and start it around September of 2018, and we're gonna watch live these 4-hour candles bounce around here. Okay, are you ready? 89 as support. Support, support, support. Weekly 10 as resistance. Weekly 10 as resistance. Straight down to the weekly 89. Straight back up to the weekly 10. Straight down to the weekly 89. Straight up to the weekly 10. And capitulate. Where did the capitulate start heating up? At the 89. Right at it. This is not a coincidence. These are the two lines. This is current price. Do you see the similar setup? The red just went below the blue. What's going to be pressure down? The weekly 10. Until when will it be pressure down? Until price gets above it and uses it as support. And from a statistical basis, we know the behavior Bitcoin has when it gets above and stays above. It's not a Humpty Dumpty reaction in which it barely gets above. It gets above it with force, usually, if it's going to stay above. So now we know what needs to happen if we're going to avoid capitulation, exactly what to look at, and exactly how prices has a statistical likelihood of moving if it's going to get above and stay above. These are the tools that you should be using within your chart analysis, your own chart for your own decision making, or at least if you don't want to just take my word for it blindly, which is probably a good idea not to, you should at least refer back to these and use them as a supplement to your own analysis of market strength. And another thing going for Bitcoin to not capitulate the first week of March is because this cross is fairly recent. A capitulation event isn't even guaranteed because Bitcoin did not have a blow off top. It doesn't have to capitulate. Rather, in being defensive, the fact that Bitcoin could capitulate and it could capitulate really soon. That's why it's important to make best guesses on the timing of a possible or potential capitulation event. As long as price is generally using the purple line, it's the weekly 89, keep it on your chart. As long as it's generally being used as support, which if price goes straight below it, as long as it doesn't come back up and use it as resistance, for example, this is a perfect example right here. It did not use the purple line as resistance after it fell below. And hopefully you can see that by having seen how price in the past perfectly respected these lines for an extended period of time. That's where the big money's eyes are looking at. And what's going to help folks newer to crypto out even more is if you click this playlist right here and learn how to set up a chart and learn basic buying and selling strategies. Click this playlist right here and you want to understand better how and why price moves the way it does. Click the circle in the middle if you're new to my channel. You just got Timified Worldwide.